And a reminder, you can also continue to follow us on Twitter, and the hashtag is TheHillAMPU. Now, one of the best ways to build consensus is through open, civil dialogue. My next guest is an expert at getting people from disparate perspectives to build those bridges, and I'm pleased to welcome David Eisner. He is the president and CEO of an organization called the Convergence Center for Policy Resolution. David, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
As you well know, our country was founded on partisan divide and fierce debate. So that is the very fabric of our democracy. My question is, how do we make that debate civil and constructive?
It's a really great question. And we should note we've been getting to this polarized, hyper-partisan spot for decades. And it's going to take us decades to get our way, to dig our way out of it. The best way to bring people together to find consensus is to make sure that they're able to listen to each other, able to understand each other's perspectives, and most importantly, able to get rid of a set of distortions that polarization gets in the way of being able to trust and engage. And the core distortions are, we feel a sense of disgust these days for people we disagree with. We have a sense that their motives, anyone we oppose, we assume that their motives are hate, whereas our motives are always positive. We act out of love. And there's a really deep sense of moralization. People that are acting from the other party are acting in a way that's immoral and probably illegal, and they're trying to destroy our core values. Well, we know that just by connecting and listening and beginning to understand, we can start humanizing the people that we disagree with. And once we're treating them and seeing them as human beings, it's not that hard to find collaborative solutions.
But you wrote a piece for the Seattle Times, and you used the word demonize, which is really the appropriate word, because often if you disagree with somebody, and it can be even in your own family, you are demonized, and it divides the family. How did we get to this point? What's different today in 2022 than, say, 1980 or 1960 or 1864?
Well, it's true. In 1980, it was a minority of people that would have been upset if their child told them that they were going to marry somebody from the other party. Today, it's a strong majority of people that say that they would be upset if one of their kids said that they were going to marry someone from the other party. And there's a lot of reasons for this. A lot of this is actually happening at a global level, not only in the United States. But in the United States, one of the things that's been happening for decades is what we call sorting, where it used to be that both parties included pro-choice and pro-life constituencies. Both parties included some northern, some southern, some rural, some urban constituencies. We're seeing through sorting that happened over decades that each party is becoming more monolithic. And so all of the ways that we think of ourselves, where we live, who we are, what we believe, are becoming much more closely aligned with party.
But let me ask you a fundamental question, because if you're on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or this new social media site called Post or Truth Social, often you can get vitriolic statements and comments about something you may post, often from people you don't know. Very different, though, if somebody were to talk to you face-to-face, one-on-one. Can you touch on that?
We know that anonymity is one of the guardrails, or actually non-anonymity is a guardrail. When people are anonymous, they will feel much more comfortable going outside the bounds of what they know they would otherwise be socially punished for. And so when they're acting anonymously, we do see people acting much more extreme. We also know that it's not only that more people act extreme, it's also that the platforms have algorithms that tend to lift up the arguments that make the most people upset and that appear the most extreme, because those are the arguments and the posts that engage more people, whether they're engaged because they're upset or they're engaged because they like them. They stay online longer. That ends up driving more eyeballs. A lot of folks are identifying this as a challenge. The solutions are much harder to come by. Currently, Convergence is doing a large dialogue on digital discourse where we're bringing a lot of folks that are from the platforms together with consumers, together with folks from both parties. And we're seeing that it's a hard discussion, but we're very, very hopeful that within 6-9 months, we'll be able to have some consensus.
Not sure if you heard my conversation with former Congressman David Jolly, who is a former Republican turned independent. And he basically said it's not only as bad as it seems, it's worse than you think here in Washington in the halls of Congress. Agree or disagree with that sentiment?
I guess I have to do both. I think that in general, it is worse than it seems. I've spent a lot of time with dozens of members, including helping groups of members find ways to collaborate with each other and find ways, for example, after January 6th of 21, to begin to trust each other again. And it is extremely difficult, and the sense of betrayal and distrust across the parties is, I think, is worse than most people would expect. That being said, there really are some powerful success stories. For example, the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress has made over 200 recommendations. The largest plurality of them are about how to achieve bipartisanship and collaboration. And Congress is paying attention. We're seeing committees beginning to think about what does it look like to do bipartisan planning. We know that as the new freshmen are coming into town, they're likely to hear more about how collaboration works, and they're likely to spend more time with the other party than they did just in the last class.
And just looking at the Republican side of the aisle in the House Republican Conference with a narrow majority for leader Kevin McCarthy. However, the expansion of these new House members came from New York and California. And so I'm wondering if that's going to create more of a moderate superpower of these House Republicans that may not be swayed by the more conservative members of the Freedom Caucus, but having their own coalition to try to drive some of this legislation.
Well, I think it's true that in a closely divided Congress, any group within an individual party is going to have a lot more power because the party requires them to get to their number. That's going to be absolutely true for folks that may be either moderate or more likely to want to collaborate with the other side. But it's also true for folks that are more extreme. I think a lot of groups are going to be testing the limits of their ability to push their parties to follow the smaller groups.
Let me ask you about a specific bill, one that passed this week with bipartisan support, 39 House Republicans joining the Democrats in the Same-Sex Marriage Act, and a dozen Senate Republicans with all Senate Democrats passing the bill. So that is one piece of legislation that the president is signing that has received bipartisan support. What are the lessons from that bill, from that legislation, and from that topic?
I think the most important lesson when you see a signpost of that kind of hopefulness is that it's just too early to say nothing can happen. They're completely stuck. There's no hope. I think you're totally right to be looking for what worked in this case. And I'm not enough of a student of this bill to know exactly why they were able to drive that kind of bipartisan support. But I suspect that it's based on relationships that were made and tested long before this bill became a reality.
And so let me conclude on that question. What advice would you give not only members of Congress, but also the party leaders who, as we well know, any meaningful change in this country comes with bipartisan support?
Anything that's going to happen meaningfully is going to come with bipartisan support. I think there's a groundswell of Americans that are terribly frustrated by the divisiveness. I think that leaders that are trying now to lead by holding party discipline and only doing things as a unified party are going to be risking frustrating more Americans with them and with the party. And I would counsel all members to be focusing first on what can they do together, and then where they feel this. There's a telltale sign when someone says, "I just can't fathom what they are thinking." That is a moment that should be a listening moment, and that should be approached with curiosity, because uh, nobody shouldn't be able to not understand why somebody is moving something forward. And so listening is really important.
The Convergence Center for Policy Resolution, David Eisner is the president and CEO. In a sentence, your mission is what?
To bring people together to solve problems and to strengthen democracy and society.
David Eisner, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.